Please don't tell anyone I'm pregnant." Her voice broke against the wind. Nora Hensley stood in the gray dawn, soaked to the skin, mud streaked up her skirts. Across the creek the ranch stretched wide and silent. Wood fences, empty corrals, a barn with one lamp burning low. Morning light touched the hills like cold iron. Cade Monroe reined in his horse. He'd been out checking the north line when he saw her, a stranger trembling beside the water, clutching a small bundle close to her chest. She looked half dead, pale as the fog curling off the stream. He dismounted without a word. The horse snorted and the wind tugged at his coat. For a moment neither of them moved. "Who's after you?" he asked quietly. She shook her head. "Please, I just need somewhere to rest. Just for a day." Her boots slipped as she tried to climb the bank. Cade caught her arm, steady but careful. Her hands were cold as river stones. He saw the fear in her eyes, sharp and wild, the kind that came from running too long. The sky was turning pale. In the distance, a crow called. Cade's gaze drifted up the ridge, hoofprints in the wet ground fresh. Riders had passed not long ago. "You can't stay out here," he said. "They'll find you." "I don't have anywhere else," she whispered. He studied her face. She wasn't a drifter. Her clothes were torn but fine once, and her speech had a trace of schooling. There was a story behind that look of ruin, but now wasn't the time to ask. He motioned toward the barn. "Come on." She hesitated, clutching the bundle tighter. Cade noticed then. It wasn't supplies or clothes. It was too small. Too carefully wrapped. He didn't ask. He just led her across the creek, water splashing against his boots. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain. When they reached the barn, he unlatched the door. The horses stirred, soft and curious. "You can stay here for now," he said. "There's hay in the loft. I'll bring water and a blanket." She looked up at him, lips trembling. "Why are you helping me?" Cade didn't answer right away. He'd seen enough cruelty in the world to recognize it in her eyes. Whatever had driven her here, she didn't need questions, just a door that stayed closed behind her. "Because someone should," he finally said. She sank onto a bale of hay. For the first time, she let the bundle rest in her lap. The faint sound of a baby's breath filled the air. Cade blinked, startled. "You've got a child," he said softly. Her eyes filled with tears. "Please don't tell anyone. Not the town, not the sheriff. No one." Outside, thunder rolled low over the hills. Cade looked toward the storm. He wasn't a man who made promises lightly, but something about her voice, fragile, desperate, hit deep. "You're safe here," he said at last. "No one'll hear it from me." He turned, pushing the barn door wider. The wind scattered the straw, carrying a mix of dust and rain into the golden lamplight. For a heartbeat, Nora thought he might send her away after all, but instead he walked out into the coming storm, his figure swallowed by the gray. She pressed the baby closer, trembling as the wind moaned through the cracks. For the first time in days, she wasn't running, but she didn't know yet. Trouble was already following her, winding down the same muddy trail, heading straight for Cade Monroe's ranch. By mid-morning, the storm had passed, leaving the land washed clean and shining under a pale sun. Cade saddled up again, rode to the creek and followed the tracks he'd seen earlier. Hoofprints. 4 riders. Heavy horses. They'd stopped near the water, then turned toward town. He didn't like it. When he came back, smoke curled from the chimney of his small cabin. Nora had moved inside, maybe to warm the child. Cade tied his horse, took off his gloves, and stepped to the door. Inside, the air smelled of damp wood and old coffee. Nora sat near the stove, feeding the fire with small twigs. The baby, tiny, maybe a month old, slept wrapped in a brown blanket. Her hair, still wet, clung to her face. "I didn't mean to intrude," she said quickly. "The barn was too cold," Cade shrugged. "You did right. There's food on the shelf." She looked down. "You're kind, Mr. Monroe." He didn't answer, just set his hat on the peg. The silence stretched between them, quiet but not unfriendly. Outside, the wind brushed against the cabin walls. "You got a name?" he asked finally. "Nora Hensley." He nodded once. "You can stay till you're strong enough to move on." Her fingers tightened on the blanket. Move on where? There's nowhere safe. That answer made him glance toward the window. The land outside looked peaceful, but peace never lasted long in these parts. He'd learned that too many times. What happened to you? He asked, his voice low. She hesitated. A man happened. He said he loved me. I believed him. Cade waited, saying nothing. When I found out I was with child, he changed. Said I'd ruined him. Then his friends came. She broke off, eyes dark with shame. I ran. Been running for weeks. Cade's jaw tightened. He'd known men like that. Smooth talkers with rot in their hearts. You ain't done anything wrong, he said simply. Nora looked up. They'll come for me. They always do, he met her eyes. If they ride here, they'll find me instead. Her lips parted as if to speak, but she said nothing. There was a steadiness in him, rough-edged, quiet like the land itself. Later that day, Cade rode into town. He needed flour, salt, and word. Deadwood Crossing was small. One street, a saloon, a feed store, and a sheriff who liked to talk. As he tied his horse, he saw them. 4 strangers sitting outside the saloon, hats low, coats dusty. Their horses were the same ones from the creek. He walked past slowly, eyes straight ahead. Inside the general store, he found Sheriff Vance buying tobacco. Morning, Cade, the sheriff said. Heard riders came through last night. Looking for a woman. Cade didn't blink. I was up north. Didn't see anyone. The sheriff studied him a moment, then nodded. They said she stole money from their boss. Name's Nora Hensley. You ever hear of her? No, Cade said evenly. Can't say I have. When he left the store, the men outside watched him. One of them, a scar down his cheek, spat in the dust and smiled thinly. Cade kept walking. He'd dealt with wolves before. By the time he reached the ranch, dusk had settled purple over the hills. Nora stood on the porch, the baby in her arms, eyes worried. Did anyone see you? She asked. Some, he said. They're sniffing around town. Her breath caught. They'll come here. Cade looked out across the fading light. Then we'll be ready. The lantern by the door flickered in the wind. Nora watched him walk toward the barn, his silhouette framed against the deepening sky. She didn't know why she trusted him, but she did. Inside, the baby stirred and whimpered. Nora hushed her child and whispered, We're safe. For now. The next morning broke cold and clear. Frost silvered the grass and the sun climbed slowly over the ridges. Cade was already outside chopping wood. Each strike echoed through the still air. Inside the cabin, Nora watched from the window, her baby tucked close against her shoulder. There was something steady in the way he moved, measured, quiet strength that made her chest ache with both fear and peace. She warmed milk on the stove, then stepped out with a cup in her hand. You should rest, she said softly. Cade leaned on the axe. Rest comes when the work's done. She hesitated. You're helping a stranger. You don't even know if I'm telling the truth. He looked at her then, eyes calm and sharp as flint. Truth doesn't matter much when someone's freezing. Nora's throat tightened. You'll regret it if they find me here. He took the cup from her, drank, and handed it back. Then I'll regret it later. The faintest smile crossed her lips before she turned away. By afternoon, they'd fallen into a quiet rhythm. Nora mended a torn shirt by the window while Cade worked the corral. The baby slept nearby, the slow sound of breathing blending with the creak of wood and the low rumble of cattle in the distance. It almost felt like peace, if not for the weight in her chest. Near sundown, Cade came in dusted with dirt. You'll need supplies, he said. Town's only half a day's ride. I'll go tomorrow. Nora's face paled. No, don't. If they see you. They already saw me once, he said. They're asking questions. Sheriff, too. What did you tell him? That I didn't know you. Her breath hitched. Thank you, he shrugged. Wasn't for thanks. Outside, the coyotes started up, their cries carrying across the plain. Nora shivered. They sound closer tonight. They always do, he said, pulling on his coat. Best get some sleep. He stepped out to check the gate. The wind had picked up again, bringing the smell of sage and faraway rain. When he came back, the lamp still burned low, throwing soft light across the room. Nora sat by the stove, rocking her baby, her face caught between exhaustion and tenderness. "Cade," she said suddenly, voice barely above a whisper, "if they come, promise me you won't get hurt because of me." He stopped in the doorway. "That's not your choice to make." Their eyes met and something unspoken passed between them, understanding sharp and simple. The next day, Cade rode out at first light. Nora stood on the porch watching the dust rise behind him. Every hoofbeat faded into the distance until there was only the wind. She turned back inside, trying to keep her hands busy, but unease gnawed at her. By midday she heard it. Another set of hooves. Not Cade's, he rode lighter. These were heavier, clumsier, and impatient. She froze, holding her baby close. Through the window, 3 riders appeared on the ridge, dark coats, guns at their sides. Her heart slammed in her chest. She ducked low, pressing herself against the wall. The riders paused, scanning the ranch, then moved on down the trail toward town. Nora waited until the sound faded, then let out a shaking breath. She rocked her child, whispering, "He'll come back. He'll keep his word." When Cade returned that evening, he saw her standing in the yard, pale but steady. "They were here," she said. "I saw them," he nodded, jaw tight. "They'll keep circling, looking for a scent." Nora's voice trembled. "You can still turn me in. Tell them I passed through. They'll leave you be." Cade looked out toward the horizon where the sun burned low and red. "You think I'd do that?" "I think you should." He shook his head slowly. "Not my way." The last light caught his face, hard and gentle all at once. Behind them, the baby started to cry, thin and hungry. Nora turned toward the sound, tears in her eyes. Cade watched her go, silent as the sky turned the color of blood and dust. By next week, the valley seemed to breathe easier, but Cade knew better than to trust quiet. Trouble liked to wait until a man stopped looking. He spent his mornings checking fences and his evenings watching the ridges. Nora helped where she could, cooking, feeding the chickens, hanging clothes to dry on the line. She moved softly, still watching the road every time the wind carried dust across it. One afternoon, as she gathered water from the well, a wagon rolled up the trail. It was Clara Gibbons, the widowed dressmaker from town, a sharp-eyed woman with a smile too bright to trust. "Cade Monroe," she called, stepping down. "Well, I'll be. You didn't tell me you'd taken a wife." Nora froze, the bucket slipping from her hand. Cade came out from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. "Clara," he said slowly. "Didn't expect visitors?" She looked from him to Nora, her grin turning sly. "Oh, I can see that. Word in town is you've got company. A woman out here hiding away." I said, "Not Cade Monroe, he's too proper for secrets." But here she is, plain as day. Nora's heart thudded. Cade stepped closer, steady as stone. "She's my wife," he said flatly. The words hit like a thunderclap. Nora blinked at him, speechless. Clara's smile faltered, surprise flickering across her face. "Your wife, you say?" "Well, I never heard of a wedding. Didn't ask for one," Cade said. "Now, if you'll excuse us," Clara's eyes narrowed. "Of course. Folks will be glad to hear it. I'll tell the ladies' circle you've settled down proper." She turned her wagon around, the wheels creaking as she left. When she was gone, Nora turned to Cade. "Why did you say that?" He met her gaze. "Because it'll keep them off your trail. A wife has a place. A stranger doesn't." She shook her head, flustered. "People will talk. They already are," he said. "Now they'll stop guessing." Nora looked down at the dirt. "And when they find out it's not true?" "Then I'll deal with it." That night she sat by the fire long after he'd gone to bed. The baby slept nearby, small and warm in her arms. Cade's lie had saved her, for now, but it carried a weight she could already feel pressing on both of them. The next morning, Cade rode into town again for feed. As soon as he stepped into the store, heads turned. Conversations hushed. Sheriff Vance looked up from the counter with a half smile. So it's true, the sheriff said. You went and married yourself a lady in secret. Cade kept his face calm. Ain't much of a secret now. Well, I'll be, Vance chuckled. Deadwood's most stubborn bachelor finally tamed. What's her name again? Nora. Pretty. Folks'll want to meet her proper. Not yet, Cade said. She's still settling in. Outside, the four outlaws lingered near the livery, pretending to check their horses. Their leader, the one with the scar, watched Cade with a lazy grin. So that's him, the man muttered. The rancher who's got our lady tucked away. When Cade rode home, the air felt heavier, charged like lightning before a storm. He found Nora hanging laundry in the wind, her hair blowing across her face. They know, he said quietly. Everyone in town. Her hands stilled on the clothesline. And the men? They're still there. Fear flickered in her eyes. It's my fault. I should have kept going. Cade stepped closer, his voice firm. No. You were running from the wrong kind of man. You stopped at the right door. For a long moment neither spoke. The sky above them glowed orange, and the shadows stretched long over the yard. Then the baby began to cry, and Nora turned toward the sound, her face softening. Cade watched her disappear inside, the wind tugging the last clean sheet from the line and carrying it into the fading light. The next few days passed under uneasy skies. The air held the feel of waiting, too quiet, too still. Cade worked from dawn till dark, fixing fences, checking the water troughs, and keeping his rifle close by. Nora stayed mostly indoors, though sometimes she'd walk the yard at dusk, rocking the baby and watching the horizon as if expecting something or someone to appear. Rumors reached them through Clara and the mail rider. Folks in Deadwood Crossing liked to talk. Some said Cade's new wife was a runaway from back east. Others said she was a widow, or worse, a woman of sin who'd trapped him with a lie. Cade didn't answer questions, and that only made tongues wag louder. One evening, as the sun fell red behind the ridge, Nora brought supper to the porch. She set down the pot of stew, her hands shaking slightly. They're talking about us, she said. Cade nodded. Let them. You don't understand. It's not just talk. Clara came by again. She asked when the church can hold a blessing. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Tell her we'll send word when we're ready. She swallowed hard.
Cade, people won't stop until they find something to hate.
And when they do, then I'll handle it. His tone was calm, but his eyes were dark. She wanted to argue, but she saw the wall he'd built. The same wall that had likely kept him alone all these years. So she said nothing. After supper, the wind rose. Cade stepped outside to secure the barn door, and that's when he saw it. Fresh tracks leading from the ridge to the back pasture. Horse prints, 3 sets. He crouched low, fingers brushing the damp earth. They hadn't been there that morning. He went back inside quietly. Nora was rocking the baby near the fire, humming low. You said no one came by? He asked. She looked up, startled. No one, why? Tracks near the back fence. They're watching, her face went pale. What'll we do? Nothing yet, he said. Let them think they've got the drop. That night, Cade sat awake by the window, rifle across his knees. Moonlight spilled silver over the yard. Somewhere out in the dark, a coyote howled, and he thought he saw movement near the trees, but when he blinked, it was gone. Just before dawn, he heard a sound, a faint knock at the door. 3 short taps, he raised the rifle and moved slowly. It's me, came a whisper. Sheriff Vance. Cade opened the door, jaw tight. You're up early. The sheriff stepped inside, eyes wary. Had some strangers in town last night. Said they're bounty hunters. Claimed a woman named Nora Hensley stole gold from their boss. You know anything about that? Cade's voice was steady. No bounty hunters came this way. The sheriff studied him a moment. You sure about that? Because one of them said you lied to my face. Said you're harboring her here. Cade's grip on the rifle tightened. You came all this way to ask me that? I came because I don't like being made a fool of, Vance said. If she's innocent, best she come forward. If not, things will go bad for both of you. Cade took a slow breath. She's under my roof. That makes her my concern. The sheriff shook his head. You've got a good name, Cade. Don't throw it away on a woman with secrets. When he was gone, Nora stepped out from the back room, her face white. He knows, Cade nodded. He suspects. There's a difference, tears welled in her eyes. You shouldn't have to lie for me anymore. Maybe I should leave before. He stopped her with a look. No, you're not running again. For a long time she said nothing. Then quietly, you'll get hurt. Cade glanced out at the rising sun. Maybe, but I'd rather get hurt standing for something than live hiding from everything. The fire in the stove popped softly. Outside, morning light spread over the valley, touching the frost on the fence rails. Somewhere in the distance, a lone rider waited, watching. By the next sunrise, the ranch no longer felt safe. Cade could sense eyes on him everywhere he went. The ridgeline, the barn roof, the empty road that led to town. He'd lived too long on the frontier not to recognize a hunt. He spent the morning sharpening his axe, checking the rifle, and walking the fence line twice. Nora watched from the porch, her baby bundled tight against the chill. You think they'll come here? She asked. Cade looked up from his work. I know they will. Her voice trembled. Then we should go right out, disappear. He shook his head. Running only keeps you tired. Sooner or later you turn and face it. Nora's eyes filled with fear. You don't understand what he's capable of. The man leading them, his name's Coulter. He was going to marry me. Cade stopped, jaw tightening. You told me he hurt you. You didn't say he was the one. She nodded slowly. He owns half the men in that gang. I told him I was carrying his child and he called me a liar. Said I'd shamed him. I ran that night. Took what gold he'd hidden under the floorboards, not for myself, but so he couldn't follow me. I thought it would stop him. Cade stared out toward the horizon. It didn't. She shook her head. No. He'll keep coming until he finds me. For a moment, the only sound was the wind through the pines. Then Cade said quietly, then he'll have to find both of us. That evening, Cade saddled his horse and rode into town again, leaving Nora with the rifle and a single warning. Don't open the door for anyone but me. Deadwood Crossing looked normal at first glance. But as Cade rode down Main Street, he saw them, Coulter's men leaning against the saloon rail, their eyes following him. One of them grinned and tipped his hat. Inside the store, Sheriff Vance was waiting. They're restless, he said. Claim the woman you're hiding belongs to their boss. She doesn't belong to anyone, Cade said flatly. Vance sighed. Cade, I can't protect you if this turns ugly. If they're telling the truth, they ain't. Cade cut in. That man beat her, nearly killed her. You really think he's the victim here? The sheriff rubbed his jaw. I don't know what to think. But I do know this, Deadwood doesn't want a shootout. You bring trouble to this town, they'll turn on you both. Cade gave a hard nod. Then I'll make sure the trouble ends before it reaches them. He left without another word. As he mounted his horse, one of Coulter's men called out, Hey, Monroe, tell your wife Coulter's comin' for what's his. Cade didn't answer. He just rode out. By the time he reached the ranch, dusk had fallen. The lamps were lit inside. Nora stood at the window clutching the baby, eyes wide with relief when she saw him. They were in town, he said as he came through the door. They know where we are, she bit her lip. Then what happens now? He set down his hat. We get ready. That night neither of them slept. Cade loaded rifles, filled the water pails, and checked the door bolts twice. Nora sat near the fire, humming softly to calm the child, her hands trembling though she tried to hide it. Cade, she whispered, you could still walk away. He looked up from the rifle. And leave you to them? I don't want you to die because of me. He paused, then said quietly, there are worse things than dying. Letting a man like that win is one of them. Outside, a coyote cried. Cade rose and peered through the window. In the distance, faint lights moved. 3, maybe 4 torches winding through the dark. They're coming, he murmured. Nora's heart pounded. She pressed the baby close, whispering a prayer she half remembered from childhood. Cade took his rifle and blew out the lamp, leaving only the red glow of the fire. Through the darkness he could see the glint of metal and the slow shapes of riders closing in. The quiet before the storm had ended. The night air was heavy, still as stone. Only the sound of horses came, slow, deliberate, drawing nearer through the sagebrush. Cade stood by the window, rifle ready, his face lit by the faint red glow of the fire. Nora crouched beside the crib, holding her baby close. Her heart beat so loud she could barely breathe. "How many?" she whispered. "4 for sure," Cade said quietly. "Maybe more waiting back," a voice called out from the dark. "Monroe, step outside." Cade's jaw tightened. He knew that voice, cold, slick, and cruel. Coulter. He pushed open the door, stepping into the moonlight. The night was sharp with dust and fear. Across the yard, 4 riders waited. Coulter sat in the middle, coat hanging open, revolver easy in his hand. "Well, well," Coulter said, grinning. "Didn't expect to find you playing house, Monroe." Cade kept his rifle low but steady. "You've come far enough," Coulter laughed. "I came for what's mine. The woman, and the gold she stole." "She stole her freedom," Cade said. "Nothing else worth taking." Coulter's smile faded. "She told you she's carrying my child, or did you figure that out yourself?" Cade's eyes flickered. "She told me enough to know you're a coward." Coulter's horse shifted, restless. "Big words for a rancher. You think you can keep her from me? You think this dirt and a half-broke rifle make you a hero?" "I think it makes me a man who's done running," Cade said. A long pause hung between them. Then Coulter's grin returned, mean and thin. "You've got till sunrise. Bring her out or I burn this place to ash." Cade said nothing. The men turned their horses and rode back toward the ridge, torches flickering in the dark. When Cade went inside, Nora was standing near the fire, pale and shaking. "He's here," she said, her voice breaking. "He's really here," Cade nodded. "He wants you by sunrise." Tears filled her eyes. "Then I'll go. I can't let you die for me." He took a slow breath. "You think I'd let him take you? After what he's done?" "You don't understand," she said, stepping closer. "He'll kill you, Cade. He doesn't care about law or mercy. Neither do I when it comes to men like him." The baby began to cry, sharp and frightened. Nora turned away, clutching her child tight. Cade stared into the flames, the light flickering across his face. "You told me once you believed in God," he said softly. "Believe he doesn't send people to each other by accident." Nora's voice shook. "Then pray he gives you sense enough to stay alive." Cade moved to the door, loading his rifle. "I don't need sense. Just aim." She reached for his arm. "Please, don't go out there again. Not tonight." He stopped, looked at her hand resting on his sleeve. Her fingers trembled and he could feel the warmth of her skin even through the worn fabric. "I'll keep you safe," he said quietly. "That's a promise." She wanted to speak, but her throat closed. All she could do was watch as he walked out into the yard, his shadow long against the dirt. The night stretched slowly. Cade stayed near the barn, hidden in the dark. Every sound, an owl, a snapping twig, the creak of saddle leather made his finger twitch on the trigger. Hours passed. Then he saw it, a flicker of light near the fence. Another torch. They were circling closer, trying to flush him out. Cade crouched low, breath steady. He could see Coulter now, riding at the front, face pale under the moon. "Time's up, Monroe," Coulter shouted. "Bring her out or I'll take her screaming." Cade raised his rifle, the barrel gleaming faintly. His heartbeat slowed. He waited until the riders drew nearer, close enough for their laughter to drift through the cold air. Then he whispered, "Not tonight," and fired. The crack of the shot tore the silence apart. One man fell from his horse. The others scattered, shouting. The gunfight had begun. Gunfire split the night wide open. The first shot echoed off the hills. Then came another, and another. Horses reared, men shouted, and sparks flared from the muzzles of their guns. Cade moved through the shadows, calm and sure. He'd fought before, out on cattle drives in border towns against men meaner than these. But this was different. This was home, and the woman inside that cabin wasn't just another stranger. Nora ducked behind the table, clutching the baby tight as bullets cracked against the walls. Dust rained from the ceiling. The lamp flickered. She bit her lip hard to keep from crying out. Through the thin door she heard Cade's voice, low, steady, commanding. "Stay down." He fired again. One of Coulter's men dropped near the fence, his torch rolling into the dirt. Another fired back from the ridge, the bullet splintering the doorframe inches from Nora's head. She prayed under her breath, whispering old words she hadn't spoken in years. "Lord, keep him alive. Please keep him alive." Outside, Cade ducked behind the well, reloading fast. The outlaws were spreading, trying to flank him. He could see Coulter's shape in the firelight, moving slowly, confident. "You can't win this, Monroe," Coulter shouted. "You think she's worth dying for? She lied to you, same as she lied to me." Cade's jaw clenched. "Difference is, I don't need to own someone to care about him." He fired again, grazing Coulter's arm. The outlaw cursed and took cover behind a wagon. "You'll pay for that," he hissed. The shooting slowed, replaced by silence and the hiss of burning torches. Smoke drifted across the yard. Cade's eyes stung, but he didn't move. He knew Coulter was waiting for him to step out. Inside, Nora rocked the crying baby, whispering, "Hush now, hush. It's almost over." But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't. Then she heard it, the creak of the back door. Someone was there. She froze. A shadow moved in the narrow light from the fire outside. A man stepped in, gun drawn, eyes scanning the room. Cade wasn't there to stop him. Nora's breath caught. She looked around wildly, then grabbed the fire poker from beside the stove. As the man turned toward her, she swung with all her strength. The iron hit his arm and the gun fell. He cursed, lunging forward, but she struck again, catching him across the face. He went down hard. The baby screamed. Nora dropped the poker, shaking. Her whole body felt hollow, running only on fear and instinct. Outside, Cade heard the noise and turned fast. "Nora!" The split-second distraction cost him. A bullet tore across his shoulder, spinning him sideways. Pain burned down his arm, but he gritted his teeth and rolled behind the trough, firing back. Another outlaw fell. Coulter's voice rose above the chaos. "You're a fool, Monroe. She isn't yours to save." Cade shouted back, "Maybe not. But she's not yours to hurt." The last two men hesitated, glancing at their wounded leader. Coulter snarled, "Get him!" Before they could move, Cade fired twice. Both dropped into the dirt. Smoke curled from his rifle barrel, the night gone deathly still except for the wind. Coulter stood alone now, breathing hard, eyes full of rage. "You'll regret this," he spat. He lifted his gun, but Cade was faster. The shot hit Coulter square in the chest. He stumbled backward, eyes wide with shock, and collapsed into the dust. His torch rolled beside him, flames licking the dry grass. Cade staggered toward the cabin, blood soaking his sleeve. Inside, Nora stood frozen, her baby pressed against her chest. When she saw him, she let out a broken sob. "You're hit," she cried. "Not bad," he said, though his face was pale. He sank onto a chair, breathing hard. "It's over." Nora knelt beside him, tears streaking her cheeks. "You shouldn't have done this for me." He managed a weak smile. "I didn't do it for you. I did it because it was right." Outside, the firelight flickered over the fallen men, painting the dirt red and gold. The wind picked up, carrying the smoke east toward the mountains. The night at last was quiet again. The dawn came soft and pale, washing the valley in silver light. Smoke still hung over the ranch, and the smell of gunpowder clung to the air. The ground outside the cabin was scarred with footprints and blood, but the wind was already covering the marks with dust. Inside, Cade lay on the cot, pale but breathing steadily. His arm was bandaged, his shirt torn. Nora sat beside him, her hair loose, eyes swollen from crying. She'd been awake all night, wiping his brow, keeping the fire alive, whispering to the baby when it fussed. When Cade stirred, she leaned forward quickly. "You're awake," she said softly. He blinked, then smiled faintly. "Didn't think I'd get another sunrise." "You will," she said. "You're too stubborn to die." He gave a low chuckle that turned into a groan. "Hurts when I laugh. Guess that's a sign I'm still alive." Nora smiled for the first time in days, but it faded quickly. Her voice shook. The town will come soon. The sheriff. They'll see the bodies. They'll ask questions. Cade's eyes opened fully then. Let 'em ask. I'll tell it straight, she looked away. You don't owe me that. You already saved me. He shifted, wincing, and reached for her hand. Maybe, but I'm tired of lies. You shouldn't have to hide anymore. The words settled between them, heavy but true. For the first time, Nora didn't feel like running. By noon, riders came up the trail, 3 townsmen and the sheriff. Dust rose around their horses as they stopped near the gate. The sheriff, a square man with kind eyes and a sharp mind, took off his hat when he saw the scene. Looks like a fight, he said quietly. Cade stepped out of the cabin, his arm in a sling, his face calm. It was. The sheriff's gaze moved over the bodies. Coulter and his men, he muttered. We've been hunting them for months. He looked up at Cade. They come for the woman? Cade nodded once. They did. Nora stepped out then, holding the baby. Her voice trembled but didn't break. He's telling the truth, Sheriff. They wanted me dead. I was engaged to Coulter once before I knew the kind of man he was. When I left, he swore to find me. I ran. I never meant to bring trouble here. The men shifted in their saddles, uncomfortable. The sheriff studied her face for a long moment, then turned back to Cade. You claimed she was your wife. I did, Cade said evenly. To keep her safe. It wasn't right, but I'd do it again if it meant saving her life. The sheriff's jaw tightened. Then slowly he nodded. Sometimes right and wrong ain't simple. He looked around at the dead men, then back at Nora. You both stay put for now. I'll tell the town what happened. Folks'll talk, but talk's cheap. When they rode off, the ranch fell quiet again. Nora turned to Cade, eyes full of tears. You didn't have to take the blame. Cade looked out toward the fading dust of the riders. Maybe not, but I'm done living halfway honest. If they judge us, they'll judge the truth, not the lie. She looked down at the baby in her arms, then back at him. You really mean to stay here with me? He met her gaze, steady and warm. If you'll have me. For the first time since she'd run, Nora felt something lift inside her, like a weight she'd carried for too long finally gone. The ranch was quiet, the wind gentle through the grass, the horizon wide and open. She smiled faintly. Then I reckon we start over. No more hiding. Cade nodded, his voice low. No more hiding. They stood together at the doorway, the morning sun spilling across the land. Clean, bright, and new. A week later, the ranch felt different. The smell of smoke was gone. The fences mended. The porch swept clean. The grass had begun to grow again where the gunfight had torn the earth. Life was returning, slow but steady, like breath after a long illness. Nora hung laundry in the wind, the baby asleep in a basket by her feet. The sky stretched wide and blue, dotted with soft clouds drifting toward the mountains. She paused, watching the sheets billow like sails, and for the first time in months she felt safe. Cade came out from the barn, his arm still in a sling, a faint limp in his step. The bullet wound had left him weak, but he was healing. He stopped at the fence, watching her for a moment before saying, Never thought I'd see this place quiet again. She smiled over her shoulder. Quiet's a good sound, he nodded. Best one I know. He leaned on the post, studying her. There was color in her cheeks now, strength in her movements. Town folks have been coming by, he said. Some brought supplies, some just came to stare. I figured, she said softly. They'll talk a long while, won't they? Maybe, Cade said. But sooner or later they'll move on to the next story. Always do. She nodded, then looked toward the baby. He's got your calm, she said. Doesn't startle easily. Cade chuckled. Hope he gets your fight too. World's got room for both. They stood quietly a moment, wind sighing through the cottonwoods. The land around them glowed gold in the afternoon sun. After a while, Nora said, I used to think love was something soft, something that just happened when life was easy. She looked down, her voice low. But it's not, is it? Cade's eyes met hers. No. It's what's left when every easy thing's gone. Her eyes filled with tears. Not from sadness, but from the strange peace of knowing she'd finally stopped running. Later that evening, as the sky turned red and the first stars came out, they sat on the porch together. The baby slept inside. A lantern flickered beside them, throwing warm light across their faces. Cade broke the silence. You ever think about leaving? Going somewhere new? She shook her head slowly. This is where I stopped being afraid. I think I'll stay. He smiled, quiet and sure. Then I will too. They watched the last light fade over the hills. Coyotes called far off. The air smelled of sage and clean dust. After a long pause, Nora said, When I first came here, I begged you not to tell anyone. I was so scared of being found. Cade turned to her, voice gentle. And now? She looked at the horizon, her face calm. Now I want folks to know. About me, about us. About what it means to stand when you could run. He reached over, taking her hand. Truth's hard, he said. But it's the only thing that lasts. They sat there until the stars thickened above the ranch, until the night became soft and full of crickets. The world felt wide again, and for once it didn't feel dangerous. It felt alive. Inside, the baby stirred, giving a small cry. Nora rose to tend to him, but Cade stood first. I'll go, he said quietly. She smiled. You sure? Yeah, he said, stepping inside, the lantern light catching the edges of his face. You've done enough running. It's my turn to carry things a while. She watched him go, the door swinging gently behind him. Outside, the stars burned steadily over the open land, the wind carrying only the whisper of grass. And somewhere in that quiet, the promise of a new life settled, built not on lies or fear, but on truth, courage, and the kind of love that stands when everything else falls away. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more Wild West tales of courage and love. Every day we bring you new stories from the frontier, where hearts are tested and legends are born. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a ride back to the Old West.